So today I get to talk about Zootopia 2, which came out last year. I did see it last year in theaters at the end of the year. I just wanted to wait until I could watch it again before I did my review. Also, that way I would have pictures, because pictures. I'm actually wearing a shirt from the Henry Dorley Zoo in Omaha that I got last year, I think. So zoo shirt, Zootopia, yay. So just up front, I really, really love how they did this movie, how they pulled stuff off, what they did with the plot, the twists. Yay. Love it. Love the new characters. Great. So, Chip may come up, he may not. I don't know. My mom just left for work. We'll see what happens. So, this movie essentially picks up pretty much right where the first one left off. It kind of like rehashes a little bit of some of the stuff that we saw at the end of the last movie. So, Chip, hi, what you doing? Are you here? Yay, I got a chip. I got a chip. I got a chip. I know you're a good boy. Yes, I know Grandma just left for work. So, as I was saying, sorry, the end of last movie, beginning of this movie, kind of just like rehashed the same things. Judy Hopps and Nick Wilde, the bunny and the fox, have managed to, incarcerate Mayor Bellwether, Don Bellwether, who was the sheep that was the mastermind villain of the original Zootopia. And now Nick has gone through the training for being part of the ZPD, and now they are continuing their partnership and trying to, catch criminals and everything else like that. And they eventually want to become detectives. Work their way up through the ranks, become detectives. Pretty much most everybody from the original movie is in this one as well. Either they make a cameo appearance for like a scene and a half, or they are a bit more involved in the movie, depending on stuff. But we also have a bunch of new characters as well. So one of those new characters is the newest mayor of Zootopia, Brian Windancer, who is a horse that is an actor that is now the mayor of Zootopia. Sure. He's funny. We'll get back to him later. And of course, because of Nick and Judy's actions, they've become a bit better well-known in the police department, so Chief Bogo, unfortunately, kind of has to deal with that. And they become a bit more well-known within, like, the public, just because of the high profile of their last case. And we start off the movie with Nick and Judy are trying to get evidence on this anteater that is a dock inspector that is allowing stuff through that shouldn't be let through, and he's like making money off of it. Anthony Snootley, and we do have Finnick back, the little fox. We do have Finnick back, and they have him playing as their child and pretending to be a mom and dad fox, or a mom bunny and a dad fox, trying to essentially con the port guy, the port inspector, the dock inspector, into signing Finnick's casts for some horrific accident in order to keep him distracted while Judy looks for evidence, finds the evidence, insert chase sequence that we have to have. The last movie ended with a chase sequence. This movie kind of begins with a chase sequence through the streets of Zootopia as they're running through. Nick and Judy end up stealing a car from a pig, who is, I believe, supposed to be the same pig from the first Zootopia that was yelling at Judy, which is hilarious because if it's the same pig, it's also voiced by Josh Dallas, who is Jennifer Goodwin's husband, and Jennifer Goodwin is Judy. So it was like the pig yelling at the rabbit, and they're married in real life. Funny bit there. I'll go over that again at the end of this. So Nick and Judy are chasing the anteater through the streets of Zootopia, and unfortunately at one point in time the anteater gets knocked out, so Judy has to jump from their car to his truck to stop him from running into a parade, because Zootopia is working on celebrating their centennial. So it's supposed to be 100 years since the creation of like the systems within Zootopia that like keep the weather in the areas where it's supposed to be. Keep the savanna dry, keep the tundra snowy, keep the rainforest wet, and then like the more general area, sunny and happy, but not dry like the savanna, or desert, or however you want to put it. So they're working on getting ready to celebrate that. And unfortunately, they save the parade. Nobody in the parade actually gets hurt, but they destroy a statue of the city's founder, Ebenezer Linksley, which is not good. And in the crash, since Nick and Judy had been separated, Nick kind of sees like Judy's truck crash, and he's like very worried that she's in the truck and hurt. She's fine, but she ends up finding what looks like a crate from overseas and reptile shedding or snake skin. So she's trying to figure out what's going on with that. They do end up getting called into Bogo's office, so we have Chief Bogo back. And we are also introduced to a bunch of these other partner cop groups. So there's like some wild pigs that are there. That are the wild boar duo. There's like a hippo duo. There's like mountain goat duo. There is the zebras that are two zebras. Theories that one of the zebras is actually a horse pretending to be a zebra because reasons. Don't ask me. And we kind of see these different, cop duo groups around throughout the course of the movie. So we kind of get to see them a bit. And Bogo is, of course, kind of chewing out Nick and Judy for, destroying the statue and causing problems, even though they did catch the bad guy. And eventually this results in like him sending everybody else out of the office and Bogo looking at Nick and Judy, mostly Judy, and being like, given my best efforts against it, I actually have come to like you, Hops. And we get like this nice little moment with Bogo where he's just like, I do like you. I like you as a rabbit. I like you as a police officer. You're a good police officer. But with your reckless actions, you're making it look bad in case there's any other young bunnies who want to try to be a police officer. You're not setting the best example. Type of thing. And so essentially what Bogo does is he sends Nick and Judy off to Partners in Crisis, which is partner counseling. Which is adorable. Where they have a Dr. Fuzzbee, who is, I don't remember what type of animal, but it's just a small little fluffy cute animal. And she is the therapist, and she is trying to help these different cop pairs of animals that aren't really getting along. Like one of them is like a bear and an armadillo, and the armadillo keeps grooming the bear, even though the bear doesn't like that. One of them is an elephant and a mouse. One of them is what looks like a deer of some kind and a badger. I think there's another one. And then of course we have Nick and Judy there. And so these other ones are ones that have like very big issues because of their difference in species. So they don't like fit well together in this regard. And Dr. Fuzzbee ends up pointing out to Nick and Judy a bunch of their problems, like right off the bat. Like Judy overtalks, doesn't let Nick talk, all the stuff. Nick deflects with jokes. To be fair, Nick fully addresses at one point in time in this movie at the beginning that the reason he deflects with jokes in regards to stuff is because he had a traumatic childhood and it's standard operating procedure to like deflect with jokes, which I'm like, fair. Yeah, no, that's fair. I get that. Which is, of course, just playing off on the backstory that we got for Nick in the first movie with the being bullied as a kid because he was a fox. And, Judy is like, she's trying to prove herself. And like, so the doctor is very easily able to like pinpoint a bunch of their issues. And neither of them really like being in the Partners in Crisis. Judy even tried to convince Chief Bogo that there must be something to do with like a reptile getting into Zootopia. And they're like, there have been snakes or reptiles or snakes in Zootopia in 100 years. Just stop it. There's nothing of that here. And so Nick and Judy both go home. Nick and Judy get made fun of by the other cops, and Judy doesn't mind them making fun of her, but she doesn't like it when they make fun of Nick. Hi, Boo. What are you doing? What are you doing, Boo Boo? Are you being a baby? I'm always a baby, Mommy. Of course I am. Good baby. And so, oh, by the way, the Anteater did get arrested, so they did get him thrown in jail. Good. So essentially what ends up happening is the duo split off and they each go back to their apartments. Also at the beginning of the movie, we had it that like Nick and Judy were just so happy about getting to be partners and everything else like that. And Judy a little more overjoyed about it than Nick because that's just the way that Judy is. And he had given her the carrot pin that she had used to record him, and then he recorded her with just a dumb bunny and everything. And she gave him that as a gift, and he has it now sitting in his apartment, which is just a small little studio apartment. Technically, it's bigger than Judy's, so I guess he's better in that regard. But his is under a gym of elephants, so yeah, you get that. So what ends up happening is, he has it there, like, kind of framed next to an article about, like, their first case, and he, like, always takes the pin with him whenever he leaves his apartment. Because it's, so it's like our first case, how much Judy means to him at that point in time. And so he has that. We also just get, like, the contrasting personalities and stuff like that. Judy's very happy. Nick is a bit more sullen at times, type of thing. Sarcastic, over the top, stuff like that. But, so Judy's trying to work on, like, the partner information. Nick just sits at home and is watching movies on Zulu. I love so many of the puns and the references in this movie, in regards to, just like the original Zootopia references to, like, stuff in our world, but, like, Zootopia-ified. So, they have, like, Zulu instead of Hulu, and there's, like, lots of different movies that are clearly puns and parodies on this channel of, like, a bunch of different movies that are on Hulu, movies and shows that are on Hulu and on Disney Plus and stuff like that. So we have, like, a nice fun thing there. So that's just, like, a fun reference there. Later on, there's, like, references to, like, sequels and prequels and stuff like that, to different movies that are based on Disney movies or Pixar movies or stuff like that. So there's fun bits there. Also, there's, like, references in this movie to, of course, like, how the original movie had, like, Mr. Big, who is, of course, in this movie. He's this whole big Godfather reference. So, we get some other references like that. There's other references to other older movies and stuff like that throughout the course of this movie. Just like there was in the original movie, which is, again, I love it. Love how they do that. And so we get a bunch of that. And Judy ends up watching a news report about what's going on for the Zootennial, because that night is supposed to be this big party at the Linksley's mansion. And the Linksleys are the descendants of Ebenezer Linksley, who was the founder and the inventor of, like, the weather walls around Zootopia. So, they're having this big celebration that night, Gazelle is going to be there performing. We'll get to Gazelle. Everybody who's anybody is there at this party type of thing at their big mansion and everything else like that to celebrate this. And there's this journal that's the Linksley's journal on display that talks about, like, the development and the creation of the walls and everything else like that. And so we're getting a bunch of that. And, like, Judy is, like, watching through this news clip, and the news anchor mentioned something about, like, and the journal hasn't been seen in public since a fatal snake bite attack 100 years ago. And she, like, Judy kind of looks into that and ends up, there is this, podcaster that Judy watches called Nibbles Maple Stick. That is a beaver. That is a conspiracy theorist. And now, conspiracy theorists for good or evil can be left up for debate. In this case, Nibbles Maple Stick is good. But what ends up happening is, Judy is looking through stuff, and she is she's figuring this out, that she thinks that the journal is going to be stolen that night by a snake, because 100 years ago there was a snake that attacked the Linksley's maid and was supposedly trying to steal the journal. And no snake has been seen in Zootopia in 100 years, and the reptiles are very much mitigated to a certain area. And this is answering a lot of the questions that were kind of left unanswered a little bit in the first movie. And even toward the end of this movie, we're going to get some questions in regards to flying animals, stuff like that. So what ends up happening is, Judy figures this out. She calls up Nick, gets to his house, essentially coerces him into being okay, we're going to go sneak into the Zootennial and look around and see what we find. And if we don't find anything, we'll just leave. And because it's either if we do this and Bogo finds out, we're going to be pulled apart. And if we don't do this and we can't get through the therapy thing, then we're going to be split apart anyway. So Nick agrees to go with her. And then we get kind of the gazelle song for the movie. We get Zoo and her singing, and it's she's performing at the Linksley's mansion at the party while we're getting all of the guests showing up and Nick and Judy showing up and everything else like that. They're, going in as security, meter maids and stuff like that. Is how they're sneaking in. So we get this nice bit, and we see Gazelle dancing about and everything else like that. So that's just fine, fun there. It's Judy's following these clues. There's these different types. There's this catering van that was the same type of van that the Anteater had driven around in. And that seems to be the same van doing the catering here. So she's okay, well, maybe there's this connection here. And essentially what ends up happening is Nick and Judy end up sneaking into the gala. This is them all dressed up nicely, Nick in his nice suit. And we have this moment of him, getting on the suit, and he's looking in his reflection in the van. And it's kind of this moment of him taking stock of his life. And so it's that nice moment there where it's when he was looking in the mirror in his flashback as a kid, and it's how far he's come and everything like that. And then we have Judy in the nice outfit, the nice yellow dress, which I do like her in. Pretty sure that's a reference to Belle. But so we have that, and they sneak their way into the party. And Nick sneaks, gets them into the VIP area, which is where the journal is, so Judy can go and take a look at the journal. And Chief Bogo was there, so they have to try to avoid Chief Bogo, because of course he's there. And Judy ends up meeting Paubert Linksley, who is the son of Milton Linksley, who is the head of this family. And he is the current, head of the Linksley family, and is essentially kind of one of the most powerful people in Zootopia type of thing. Because his great grandfather is the one who built the weather wall and everything else like that. So we meet Paubert Linksley and Milton Linksley, and then he also has two other siblings, Catrick and Kitty are his two older siblings. And Paubert is very different from his siblings. He's much less refined and everything else like that. And he's kind of seen as kind of the outcast or the disappointment of the family, is kind of what we end up seeing. He's very, stumbles over his words, different things like that. Not as, refined and elegant as his father or as his siblings are. As what is expected of a Linksley. We'll get to that. And so Judy is kind of trying to look at the journal. It's inside of this a sealed glass case with a scanner on it that you have to get past to get to the journal and everything. And when they're getting ready to have this moment to have this speech, Nick has figured out that because Nick and Judy kind of got separated. Nick found snakeskin, and then he kind of saw that there was a hooded figure going around. Hooded figure drops onto the stage, pops out of the cloak, and it is revealed to be a blue pit viper. Pit viper's name is Gary the Snake. So Gary, we don't learn that quite yet, but his name is Gary. Just going to refer to him as that. And what ends up happening is everybody freaks out. Everybody in the room freaks out. Mayor Winddancer is there. Bogo and the police start trying to do whatever. Gary grabs Ebenezer and grabs the journal and is just like getting through the mansion as fast as he can, trying to get to a secluded area. Judy is chasing him, and they, get into this room. Gary scans Ebenezer's eye with the retina scanner to get the journal out, and then Gary is essentially, Judy thinks that Gary is the bad guy. And of course, we kind of get the scene where Gary's just like, no, I'm not the bad guy. We've never been the bad guys. We didn't hurt anybody, and this journal can prove it, type of thing. And I just want to let my family be able to come home. And what ends up happening is, of course, this doesn't go well. Gary gets knocked out by Nick, who did not hear the whole story. Rapunzel style, he uses a frying pan to knock him out, which is just funny. So Rapunzel reference there. And so knocks him out. And then Ebenezer looks, gets up, dusts himself off, picks up the journal, and is like, very good. Now kill the snake and write up a report that, makes it look like he was trying to attack me, blah, 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 blah. And Nick and Judy both get these vibes of, oh, that's not good. And his other two children run in, and the police are right behind them. Unfortunately, what ends up happening is chaos ensues, because that's what happens in the Zootopia movies. Chaos ensues, and we have to have this big miscommunication that is kind of valid in this case, because what happens is Nick and Judy are trying to save Gary. Nick's doing it because Judy asked him to, and they're trying to save Gary. Gary ends up getting thrown about, unfortunately woken up, and Bogo runs into the room, ends up getting fanged in the head, which, by the way, snake venom in this movie, very fast acting. I'm like, okay, I have seen a lot of nature shows, courtesy of Steve Irwin and Jeff Corwin and stuff like that as a kid, and I don't remember snake bites being, even very, very venomous ones, being quite like, you've been bit. Fainting like a maiden on a Victorian couch. Fainting like a maiden on a Victorian couch. Like, oh, I've been bitten. What now? Type of thing. I'll surely pass. I mean, yes, snake venom, not good. If you ever get bitten by a snake, go to the fucking hospital. No argument there. Ever get bitten by a venomous snake, or even if you're not sure if it's a venomous snake, go to the hospital. No argument here. Try to maybe identify what snake it was. Type of thing. Also, don't go just touching random snakes. Not a wise decision. But unfortunately, Chief Bogo gets fanged, and then Judy pulls out the fang, and unfortunately, with the image that the other cops see, it looks like Judy tried to attack Chief Bogo, plus the Linksleys blame Nick and Judy and Gary for what's going on. Nick, Judy, and Gary manage to escape. Gary gets taken off by, assisted by a figure on a motorcycle, and then Nick and Judy are trying to escape. They end up getting grabbed and thrown into the back of a van that belongs to, thankfully, Mr. Big. Get Mr. Big back. Yay. So they get taken to Mr. Big's warehouse that has now been turned into a side hustle to make counterfeit apparel. Purses, coats, shoes, accessories, all this other stuff. And everything has now been pinkified because Frou Frou is now kind of running the things for the family business, for the Mr. Big. And of course, Judy and Mr. Big, or Frou Frou and Mr. Big are there, and they have Judith, that is his granddaughter, that is Judy's little goddaughter, that is, Frou Frou's daughter from the first movie and everything, that is named after Judy. So we have all of that. To be fair, because there is a little bit of a time jump in between the end of the first movie and this movie, because of course Nick and Judy stop Bellwether, and then what ends up happening is, of course, Nick then needs to go through ZPD training. And we don't ever get an exact answer of how long that takes, but it seems to take at least a couple of weeks, if not maybe a couple of months, depending on stuff. Because we kind of saw some hints of that at the beginning of the first Zootopia movie with what Judy had to go through, and Nick has to go through the same thing. And so we get that. So time has passed. So little Judy is a little bit grown up. She's like a little kid. And of course being fawned over by her mom and her grandfather, which is adorable. And Mr. Big and Frou Frou are offering they give them information about the Linksleys that's definitely like, you don't want to mess with the Linksleys, just stop. They are too dangerous, and if they want more territory, they are going to try to get as much territory as they can. Judy doesn't like this. She thinks that's wrong. Fair. And Mr. Big, because he happens to like one of them, he likes Judy, he's willing to give them new identities and ship them off to somewhere else. So that way they'll be safe. Nick wants to take them up on this offer right away. Judy does not. Judy wants to solve this case and, find out whether or not the snake is innocent and everything else like that. And find out what's going on. So, doesn't end up working. But Mr. Big does give them a bit of an information that, the Linksleys are the ones who have the designs for the weather wall and everything else like that that's in the journal and all of that stuff. So, they need to get their hands on the journal. Which they do have, because Nick and Judy ended up with the journal when they were leaving. When they were in the whole chaos of escaping, they got their hands on the journal. So what ends up happening is okay, well, we need to find someone else who can help us with this. We need to go talk to a reptile. And they're like, but there haven't been reptiles in Zootopia for 100 years and everything. And so it's like, well, maybe we know someone who can help you with that. So Frou Frou puts them in contact with Nibbles Maplestick, who shows up and who is very eccentric. And Nick is just creeped out by her to a degree. I don't blame him. And because Nibbles just jumps around from but Nibbles takes them to the Marsh Market. While all of this is going on, Bogo is in the hospital recovering from the snake bite. They got him the anti-venom. And one of the pig cops, one of the wild boar cops, Hogbottom, I think it is the one who is now kind of in charge of the ZPD. I'm assuming because maybe they've been the longest or they're the ones taking point on this. And we find out that Wind Dancer has essentially been bought by the Linksleys, as in he's on their payroll. He's the mayor because he's useful to the Linksleys. Which they don't like, which, he seems uncomfortable with, but, he kind of has to put up with it at the moment. So they're trying to track down Nick and Judy. Nick and Judy have gotten rid of their phones, so they can't track them that way. And we go through a bunch of that. Then we get to Nibbles taking them to Marsh Market, which is this, it's kind of shown as this kind of, backwater, literally, because it's in a swamp, area. And we see, a dolphin there. We see a sea lion. We see a bunch of other more, aquatic kind of mammals, that we did not see in the first movie. I mean, we see, hippos and stuff there, but hippos, there's hippos that are cops, but then there's also hippos that are here. So it's it's not supposed to be stereotyping stuff, but there's a dolphin that's there and a sea lion, and Nick and Judy are kind of keep getting misconceptions about stuff, and Nibbles has to keep telling them, no, don't do that. Do not feed this animal. Do not touch this animal. Stop doing that. Don't insult that animal. Things like that. So then they end up meeting this walrus who is essentially going to take them to this boat which is the hideout for all of the reptiles. And we have this funny scene where it's just Nibbles talking to the walrus, and it's just hey, back and forth is one of the trailer things. And he brings up this little thing that they can ride on, and then Nick and Judy makes a comment to Nick of happy anniversary, because it's a week since they've been partners. And the walrus goes, oh, it's your anniversary? And he clicks a button, and the little thing that they're on as they're riding across lights up, and you start hearing Bella Notte from Lady and the Tramp. which is just great. We just start hearing Bellinote in the background, and like he starts singing along to it, which is just great. And they get over to this like partially sunken ship, which is the reptiles' hideout, and they get inside, and Nick and Judy are kind of like arguing about this because like Nick says that reptiles make him uncomfortable, and Judy's kind of brushing that off. And so it's like they're kind of going back and forth, and they're kind of, Nick and Judy keep coming to different like points where like Judy is essentially like railroading Nick, and like they are clearly not on the same page, possibly not even in the same book at times, let alone the same page. And essentially what ends up happening is yeah, they end up kind of arguing and stuff like that, but then they have to go inside and they need to talk to Jesus, which is, he is a Jesus basilisk, I believe is what he is, or a basilisk lizard, or a Jesus lizard, because it walks on water. That joke pays off later. And what ends up happening is they end up going and talking with Jesus, and like as they're walking through the bar, we're seeing lots of these other different types of reptiles and stuff like that, you know, eating flies and other stuff and all this other stuff. And they get to Jesus, who is, you know, like this booth, and he's like, you know, okay, before we talk, eat. And he puts like this plate of worms in front of them. And like Nibbles had said, now, if they offer you anything to eat, it's very rude if you refuse. So eat it. And like, so he puts worms in front of them. And like Judy pulls out a little worm, and like she doesn't want to. She's like, like eats the worm. And then Nick pulls out like this huge long worm and he eats it. And then Jesus and Mabel just start laughing, and Jesus is like, hey guys, they ate the worms. Like, I don't eat worms. And then, like, essentially, like, you know, I don't eat worms, you idiots, type of thing. It's like, as they fell to the preconception. Now, I get the funny bit, because it's the Lion King reference to, like, you know, Simba having to eat, you know, the bugs with Timon and Pumbaa and stuff like that. Although these ones were definitely not slimy yet satisfying. But it is kind of this funny bit where it's just like, okay, yeah, no, we don't eat bugs here. It would have been interesting if, like, Nick and Judy both, like, if Judy was like, you guys don't really eat bugs. You guys don't eat worms, type of thing. And if you might have been like, are you sure? And, like, you know, pushed her and maybe she still ate it. But, you know, it's the type of a thing like that. Because it's like, oh, they have preconceived notions about the reptiles. So, yeah. What ends up happening from there is, like, they're talking with Jesus, and he explains to them, like, he looks over the journal. And we get kind of this bit of an explanation that, you know, the Linksley's maid had been a turtle, and she had been fanged, and 100 years ago, and then all of the snakes were chased out of Zootopia, and all of the reptiles were essentially delegated to, like, just the Marsh Market area. And now the Linksleys are getting ready to expand Tundra Town again, and that would involve destroying Marsh Market. So we're getting to look around the bar, this area, this hideout, at all of these different reptiles that are about to be put out of a home, as well as, like, the other animals that live in Marsh Market that are going to be put out of a home because they're seen as less desirable by the Linksleys. So, real world politics coming into play there. And, you know, so we get a bunch of that. And Judy points out that, like, the cover of the journal is made of metal. And he's like, yes, that's something, there's probably something hidden on the cover that only a heat-seeking viper or a heat-sensing viper can find. And she's like, but why would Linksley hide something on the cover of his journal that only a viper would be able to see? And he's like, I don't know. And at that point in time, they are found by the ZPD, that, you know, track them down and everything else like that. So we get another chase sequence. And first of all, Jesus runs away by running on the water. Perfect. No notes. That's the type of lizard he is. I have no problem with this. He runs away on the water. I love it. Gary shows up. I think Gary does get a hold of the journal and then is trying to escape. And Nick and Judy are chasing after Gary, as well as being chased after by the cops. Judy's, like, you know, causing a bunch of chaos around as they're trying to chase after Gary. And they end up going through one of the... In the first movie, we see, like, these different kind of hydro transport tubes that help get people around the city faster, like hippos and stuff like that around the city faster. Nick and Judy jump into one chasing after Gary, and it's a red line one, which means that there's not an exit for long enough before you run out of air. So Judy is chasing after chasing after Gary through this tunnel, and Nick is trying to get them out of the water tunnel. Nibbles does get captured by the ZPD. We'll get back to that later. And so Nick thankfully gets him and Judy out of the tunnel at like one of the emergency exits before they both drown. And they're like kind of outskirts outside of Zootopia area. And so they find the bag that had been with Gary that has some other information in it, and following clues and talking to two pair of German accented goats that are very old and have walkers, but they're still jumping around on the cliffs, which is just funny. It's just hilarious. And what ends up happening is the goats give them clues, tell them that there is a honeymoon resort essentially at the top of this mountain, and either you can get up from that town over there or you can scale the cliffs. And it got shut down after a while because it became like a popular hideout for like reptiles and snakes and stuff like that. So that's where Judy and Nick end up going. Now we get to kind of part of the big, huge amount of misunderstanding in the movie. That is kind of fair in this point, and I'll give it to him. So they're climbing up the cliff, and they are arguing, and Nick keeps trying to get Judy to leave. He keeps trying to get her to give up on this, and that they can go and escape, and they can go be, Rick Wilde and Judy and Trudy Cabbage Patch, or whatever the case was. There were the fake identities that Mr. Big and Frou Frou made for them, so they can try to get out of there and get to somewhere safe where they're not wanted criminals. So that's, Nick is trying to convince her of this, and Judy is not letting go of this. And in the process of all of this, the pen during this argument, the carrot pen, that is, of course, the one that was from their first case and everything, that was kind of like this representation of like their friendship through at the end of the first movie, and has been kind of a representation of their bond in the second movie, ends up falling and shattering on the ground into tiny little pieces. And Nick looks devastated. Judy looks sad too, but she just like sucks it up, climbs up the rest of the way to the mountain, and starts investigating the honeymoon hotel cottage area up there that is falling apart. Nick is much more devastated by this. And so it's like this big rift that's growing between them, and that point literally represented that way. So Judy's looking around. She finds a bunch of these clues that were clearly left by the snake, by Gary. And, it's like all this, those red string theory boards about like what happened to the reptiles and that Marsh Market is going to be destroyed, Tundra Town expansion, all this other stuff. So it's a bunch of that. And what ends up happening is Judy is like looking over this and realizing that, there were families involved in this. There were families that were destroyed the first time because of what the Linksleys did with destroying the reptile area, that there had been a reptile area in Zootopia, and that they didn't know about that because it had been erased essentially by the Linksleys, and all this other stuff. Again, it's like answering questions that were kind of questions that were had from the first movie, for like, where are all the reptiles and stuff like that. So we get a bunch of that there. And what ends up happening is Nick and Judy end up getting into this argument because, of course, the ZPD are on their way. And Judy says that maybe her and Nick are different when it comes to their priorities. But, of course, Nick keeps misremembering at it as her saying maybe we're too different in regards to like too different to be partners, too different to be friends type of thing. And so we get that. And then we have like this whole thing where like the building literally is breaking apart around them. and like Nick and Judy are being separated. So again, it's like this metaphorical thing for like what is going on with their relationship, if it's being broken, as like the hotel is falling apart around them as they're being chased by the ZPD. And Gary shows up along with Paubert, who was the one who helped him escape before. And they are, they end up saving Judy, getting her out of there. Nick gets captured, unfortunately, by the ZPD, but he refuses to give up Judy's location, even when being threatened by Milton. By the dad Linksley. Because even though he's even though he is sad and kind of angry at Judy, he still does not want that to happen because he doesn't want her to be hurt. So Nick gets taken away. Judy wakes up in the sidecar of a motorcycle with Gary and Paubert, who reveal that they've been friends for a while and they've been working on this to try to figure out a way to restore Gary's family's name. Reveal what's going on. So we essentially get this whole bit where like they're getting to talk to each other, and Judy and Gary are kind of, like explaining stuff, and like, Gary, Judy's very kind of wary of his fang, and he says, oh, don't worry about that. Pulls out, like, he has like a little pouch, and since he's a snake, he doesn't have hands, he keeps using his tail for everything, which is great. References back to Ka and Sir Hiss from Robin Hood. No arguments here. Ka from Jungle Book and Sir Hiss from Robin Hood. Essentially the same snake, but you get the idea. And, so we get a bunch of that. So Gary pulls out like this pen that is essentially supposed to be like it's an anti-venom pen, but it's like an EpiPen for like if you have someone who has like allergies and stuff like that. So it's supposed to be used as like an EpiPen. And so he's like, oh, don't worry, I have an EpiPen. And so it's fine. So they end up going through and setting up like this little fire area for Gary so they can like heat up the cover of the journal that allows Gary to then use his heat vision, his thermal vision, to be able to see through the cover of the journal. And while this is happening, Judy is realizing that the walls of Zootopia were not designed by the Linksleys, were not designed by Ebenezer Linksley. They were designed by Agnes the Snake, who is Gary's great grandmother. So we're having this moment where Gary's looking over everything and looking over the cover, and he's like drawing out like the map of Zootopia the way that it is on the cover, and like drawing where the reptile ravine was. And that's where like a bunch of the reptiles had lived 100 years ago. That's been how it had been set up. And that Gary's grandmother had been the one to figure out like the weather wall system and everything else like that. She ended up being framed by Paubert's great-grandfather, Ebenezer, who killed the tortoise, the maid, the tortoise maid, and framed Agnes for it. From there, we learned that there had actually been, like, the original patent in the journal had been given to Agnes. That had been taken out. Ebenezer put in his own forged one to make it seem like he's the one who came up with this idea in order to discredit her. And then framed her and got her and her family, her and her family got kicked out of Zootopia. Because the maid had saw what happened and she had gotten the page to Agnes, the page is now hidden in Agnes's house, which is actually covered under a bunch of snow on the Linksleys' land in Tundra Town. Just to sum up all that. So, and now Tundra Town is going to expand again and going to get rid of Marsh Market. So we're getting a bunch of that. And so we get kind of like a nice flashback sequence there that kind of explains that. And Paubert explains that like, Gary sent a letter to our mailroom to try to explain everything. And I'm the one who found it because I have to work in the mailroom and everything. Paubert is very much like this like black sheep of the family, as in like he is the disappointment of the family, which is very obvious whenever we see him interacting with any of his siblings or his father. He is viewed as this disappointment in the family. And, so Paubert teamed up with Gary, smuggled him in, was going to help Gary find this information so that way he would be able to then, prove everything and stop Paubert's evil family and everything else like that. So Nick and Judy, Gary and Paubert are going to go to head to the wall so that way they can get inside and like there was a lighthouse in the reptile district. If they restart the lighthouse, they can find the reptile district, and then they can find where Gary's great-grandmother's house was and find the information there. That is the whole plan. But first they have to get through, get to one of the tundra walls, or one of the walls into Tundra Town to get to that information and to restart that, the power source to Reptile Ravine. So that's what's going on there. Back with Nick, who has been now thrown in jail, and he's across the cell from Nibbles. Nick kind of has this kind of a breakdown a little bit where he really wants to help Judy, but he doesn't know what to do, and he he really wanted to help Judy, and he's so worried about her and everything like that, and he doesn't know what to do. Nibbles ends up getting them out of there by essentially nibbling a key out of a mop so they can get out of the cells, which is funny. This, of course, results in a giant prison breakout with 200 other prisoners escaping from the ZPD, including Mayor Bellwether, who has a nice scene where it's like her talking with Nick, and it is clearly this reference to Silence of the Lambs, because she's a sheep, and she's in a padded cell type of thing. So we have a reference there. So again, throw in references to other movies, which is just great. And so we go through there. Nick and Nibbles end up getting help from Flash, who was the sloth from the first movie, who is the, of course, super fast driving sloth, who has them try to get, is using them and information from Clawhauser, because Clawhauser is here. Love Clawhauser and the donuts. And they are getting through to get to where Judy is by tracking where the ZPD thinks they are, because Paubert's family have realized they can track him on his phone in order to try to get the information on where he is. We clear on that? Okay. So at this point in time, Judy, Paubert, and Gary are making their way through Sahara Square, which is having a big burning mammal festival, and Gazelle is there with her tiger dancers. That comes into play in a second. Judy and Paubert and Gary end up in Gazelle's tent. Gazelle recognizes them, knows who Judy is, because Judy, of course, helped prevented the predators being framed at the end of the first movie. And of course, Gazelle's dancers are all tigers, so they're all predators, and she really cares about them. There's a whole side theory that thinks that she's in a relationship with one of them. And at the gala, one of her dancers had been attacked by the zebras, so now she has a vendetta against the zebras. They let Judy and her group through the tent, and then they essentially have a grudge match against the zebras, with Gazelle body slamming at least one of them. Thank you. So we have fun bit there. Unfortunately, one of the things is that they have shifted where they are now, where Ebenezer is forcing Hogbottom and such to use lethal force against Judy, which means that they are going to be using a lethal dart, which is essentially the stuff that they use to put down animals. And given I've had several dogs go through that, that is not a fun thing to think about. And so we have whole things are converging at this point in time. Judy and her group are just at the wall, just trying to get inside, right about to be able to get inside. And Hogbottom and the others show there. And Hogbottom hesitates. Hogbottom is about to shoot, can't bring themselves to do it, pulls back the gun, unfortunately gets knocked into by one of the hippos, and the shot gets sent off anyway. And right when you think it's about to get Judy, the car that Flash is driving that has Nick and Maples in it jumps in front of the Nick and Nibbles in it. Tongue twister. Shows up, blocks the dart, and Nick jumps out of the car. Nibbles jumps out of the car, chasing after Judy. Judy's group does get into the building, and eventually Nick and Nibbles both get into the power area as well. And of course the ZPD are trying to figure out how to get in there, and they get into the Judy and her group get into the main control room, and they're able to get into the control room that controlled the stuff for Reptile Ravine, and they restart that power, and they look through the window and they see the lighthouse light up that is on the Linksley property. They see the lighthouse area light up. And they're like, okay, yay, we can go and do this now. This is going to work. We can get the patent and prove that Gary's great-grandmother was innocent and prove that, Ebenezer was bad and everything. And then Judy's like, oh, good, this will be great. And then, and we can get, Nibbles and, get Nick and all of this stuff and we'll be fine. And then we have the moment where we have the twist. And she's like, well, at the last one, there was this twist that happened at the end. And Paubert betrays them. Paubert pulls out a snake venom injector, just like what his great-grandfather had used, and stabs Judy with the snake venom that is supposed to be the same type of venom that Gary has. Doubt the morgue is going to check any of that for an autopsy, but sure. Stabs her. Grabs Gary, throws him out into the cold, so that way, because he's a reptile, he needs heat in order to function. That is the way that they work. Throws him out, does this whole speech about, if I can, once I get that blueprint and destroy it, then I won't be different from my family anymore. And Judy's like, but you can be different from your father and your siblings. You can be different. He's like, I don't want to be different. And a lot of other movies would have had something here where Paubert, either he genuinely wanted to be better, or he had gone into this wanting to pull this off, and then in the process he realizes that, he really actually likes Judy and Gary, and he does genuinely want to be friends with them, and stuff like that. Nope. Paubert's just been, acting up this whole time, playing the dumb guy, the dumb, nice, laughable, lovable idiot, and has now stabbed Judy, tossed Gary into the cold, stabs Nibbles as well, and ends up holding Nick at, fang point and wrestling him on a ledge of ice on the wall while Judy is being forced to watch from the cameras in the control room. And he also, Paubert also tossed away has the bag that has the anti-venom in it, so that's not good. So Gary can't use the anti-venom to help Judy. So we're getting to the whole big climax of a bunch of stuff right here. So, and this is kind of the emotional climax of the movie that we have here, where Judy is dying and Nick is trying to fight against Paubert because he realizes that, oh my God, you hurt Judy type of thing. So Nick's just angry about this and sad. And Gary has this moment where he uses the last of his strength to get over, crawl across the floor, slither across the floor as best he can to Judy and be like, you are my best warm-blooded friend. Permission to hug. And Judy's like, yes. And Gary wraps around her and uses her body heat to start to essentially jumpstart his system. And he's then protecting her because the ZPD run into the room and they think that he's trying to hurt her, but that's not the case. So he's kind of fighting back against them, manages to get his head to pop out the window and yell up at Nick that you have to toss me down the fanny pack. You have to toss me down the anti-venom pen. And, Nick hears this, manages to get a hold of the anti-venom pen. And there's actually this moment where it's the big tension moment where, if Nick reaches for this, it's going to cause the cliff that him and Paubert are on to drop. And, Nick doesn't really hesitate. He grabs the pen, cliff starts shattering, tosses it up to where Gary is. Gary manages to grab the anti-venom pen, activate it, and stab it into Judy's heart, because that's where you're supposed to stab it. Stab it into Judy's heart to, anti-venom her system, which clearly seems to work like an adrenaline shot at the moment. She, anti-venom kicks into place. She jumps up, is running down the stairs as fast as she can as the cliff is collapsing. And her and Gary, they're able to grab Nick before he falls to his supposed doom. And calls them back up onto a different ledge that's not going to fall apart. And, Nick and Judy are separate, and then they run at each other and hug, and then we get this great moment where they're being I'm trying to apologize, and they're both apologizing and laying everything bare essentially. And it's just Nick's I'm sorry that I was acting that way. It's just that I'm a fox and I've always wanted a pack. And and you're my pack, and I'm supposed to try to keep you safe, and I didn't want to see you get hurt, and blah, 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 blah. And you're like, you are my emotional, you are my best friend, and you are my pack, and all this other stuff. And Judy's like, and I'm, I do this because I'm so worried about, not feeling adequate, and like all this other stuff. And like, so it's like they're both laying their issues emotionally bare to each other. So it's a great scene there for like just cathartic for them. And, Judy admits that she doesn't like being seen as weak and just wants acceptance from others, because she was like, she's a rabbit, and so many rabbits are seen as weak in this world because they're not a predator, or they're not one of the bigger prey animals that can, like defend themselves, type of a thing. Like hippos can, and rhinos, and even Bogo as like a wildebeest and stuff like that, or the elephants. She has a much harder time being able to defend herself in that regard, from what you would think. And she says, Nick calls her part of his pack, and she calls him her fluffle, which she has to then explain, that's a group of bunnies, and like they're hugging and all of this stuff. And like Gary's just like off to the side going like, I'm gonna go save your friend now. And he like slithers off to go give Nibbles the other anti-venom. Give Nibbles more anti-venom, which is just funny. He's just like, I'm just gonna leave you two to your moment now. Slithers off, helps Nibbles. By the time they come back, Judy and Nick are like, their relationship is like patched up and better at that point in time. And she's like, yep, I survived. So did that guy. Points over at Paubert, who's running over the snow, trying to get to the lighthouse, trying to get to where the page is. So they're all chasing after him. They steal a bike, a snowmobile, chasing after him. End up, having to go through the Linksley mansion. Paubert explains to his family what he's trying to do, and they're like, fine, go and do that. And Nibbles ends up, busting them into the room. Stuff gets revealed. Mayor Winddancer takes his rightful place as actually defending his city, and ends up allowing, because Paubert goes off, and Nick and Judy and Gary are chasing after him. The snake now has a scarf, so he's not going to be cold. And then Nibbles ends up kind of like inspiring Winddancer to, be the real hero that he can be, which he does, and he ends up like beating up the rest of the Linksley so Nibbles can go chase after her friends. And then we have this great bit where we have this chase between Nibbles, between Nick and Judy chasing Paubert, and there's like this giant maze that Paubert is running through, and they're just like, what are we gonna do? And then they look over and they see this giant snowplow, and they just snowplow their way through the maze, and which is just great. And of course, the maze is, Paubert is like, he's like, ha, like he's like off his rocker at this point in time as he's going through the maze, and it's clearly supposed to be this reference to like The Shining, where Jack Nicholson's character is like wandering through like the maze at one point in time in the movie. I have never seen The Shining. I've driven past the hotel that it's based on, though, but I've never seen The Shining. I don't think I ever want to, although I think it's Jack Nicholson that I do share a birthday with. I think he's one of the celebrities that I share a birthday with. But like, so they're chasing, Paubert looks deranged as he's making his way through the through the maze, and then Nick and Judy are chasing after him in the snowplow and destroying the maze in the process, which is great. And they do manage to catch up to him, and then there's like this bit of a fight between them and Paubert, and then he has them both pinned to the snow, and he's just like, you're just a rotten fox and a dumb bunny, and you're just lesser mammals and everything else like that. So he goes into the spiel that's like what he's been told by his family his whole life, that if they're not a lynx, they're a lesser mammal type of a thing. And they're just like, yeah, we may be a bunny and a fox, but you're forgetting something. We're also friends with a snake. And then Gary comes out of nowhere and beats the crap out of Paubert. Subdues Paubert. They tie him up. They make their way into the reptile ravine by following the light to the lighthouse. And they get inside. They get to where Agnes's house is. We have this nice moment where Gary is like, for the first time, a member of his family is getting to return to like his ancestral home. Hasn't been there in 100 years. And like, they find the information, they find the page, and like, right as all that's happening, Paubert jumps in, throws in a lit lantern, tries to set everything on fire, and is like just raging mad again, and then gets whacked on the back of the head with a frying pan by Hogbottom. And the rest of the ZPD who show up, and they're on the side of Judy and Nick now because like they know what's going on, they've been informed, stuff like that. And so we get some, that great bit there. And then we essentially cut to like all of the Linksleys are being arrested. The others are being like interviewed about this. It's this another huge news story. And we kind of get what is essentially like the, Nick and Judy have like, they fix their relationship and it's stronger than ever and everything else like that. And they are now teaching other ZPD partners to accept each other's differences. So it's like we have the other partners come in that are the like the same set partners that are like, Hogbottom and their partner that are both like the wild boars and the hippos and the zebras and, stuff like that. So it's like helping them, helping partners accept the differences in each other in order to build a stronger partnership in this regard. And of course, this is stuff that they can be used when it comes to partnerships at work, when it comes to partnerships, when it comes to friendships, when it comes to family, when it comes to romantic partners, all that other stuff. Very good things there. And so we have all of that, and then now it is the reptiles are now able to, the reptiles and such are now able to freely come back to Zootopia. They're not relegated to Marsh Market anymore. The snakes can come back, so it's like we see a bunch of the reptiles out and about. We see like Jesus out and about in like some of the other areas, and like there's this big party now that Reptile Ravine is open again, and he ends up going through a bunch of this stuff. And we have like this big party at like the snake house where like Gary's parents and siblings show back up again, and like we have just like everybody's there, like Judy's parents and like siblings are there, and like a bunch of the ZPD are there, and like Nick and Judy and Gary had gone and visited Bogo and like apologized for fanging him, and like a bunch of this other stuff is like happening, and then like Nick and Judy are just like, okay, well we gotta go, and our next case is recapturing all of those 200 criminals that you let escape when you let me out, and Nick's like, worth it. So they end up tracking down, it's Bellwether first, who's trying to escape to Outback Island, where we have a Robert Furwin, who is a koala. And there's Outback Island, which is clearly supposed to be Australia, which is the joke because I think that's where, several jokes, but I think that's supposed to be where Frou Frou and Mr. Big were going to send Judy and Nick for them to like have new identities for us on Outback Island, which is funny because Australia is a penal colony, was originally in European history a penal colony where they sent a bunch of their prisoners. So funny jokes there, funny koala bit there. They capture Bellwether, all this other stuff. Then we get the mid-credits scene, which is, of course, Gazelle singing Zoo again at, like, the Burning Mammal Festival that they're having. And we essentially get to see everybody show back up because everybody, like, at the end of the first movie, they had her singing, Try Everything as, like, this big party as Zootopia is reunited. And now it's, this is, like, all of them are all back together again. People who should be in jail are in jail, and we're getting like, seeing all of them. Wind Dancer is a better mayor, taking him very seriously. Paubert's in jail along with his family. Nick and Judy are happy. Gary and Nibbles are happy, and everybody's, all the different, we see everybody like dancing as like, Gazelle is singing and everything else like that. And of course we get like all the credits going there showing, who is who, for all the different voice actors. Almost done. And then we have a post-credit scene where we have Nick had given Judy back the pen and it's been like pasted back together, and they like have black stuff used to paste it back together, but I'm assuming it's supposed to be a reference to kitsuge, which is in Japan, where if something breaks, you use like a vase or a bowl or plate or something like that. You fix it with gold, and now it has extra value because it has been broken, and now it has been pasted back together using gold paste in order to like fix the broken parts and to show that it is now stronger. And this pen has now been put back together, and Nick gave it to Judy, and she's putting it in like this little stand for like, from your emotional support animal type of thing. And her two neighbors, Bucky and Pronk, who are the two gazelle whatever neighbors that she had in the first movie, are like yelling at her through the walls and everything. And she says, it's like, yeah, my next case is about a bunny who strangled her annoying neighbors. And they're like, okay, never mind. And she leaves. And then we hear like the sound of a bird and flies over her window, and a feather falls next to the carrot and then vanishes. So Zootopia 3 maybe will involve birds? Maybe? That's what I got there. Now we get cast. It's longer than I anticipated it being, but I'm getting through this. Now we have cast. So pretty much anybody who was from the first movie, I believe that same actor returned to voice them again. So we, of course, have Jennifer Goodwin as Judy Hopps. We have Jason Bateman as Nick Wilde. We have Ke Kwong as Gary D. Snake. Love him. I love that he's had such a resurgence because of Everything Everywhere All at Once, which I have seen and I very much enjoyed. Then we have Fortune Feimster as Nibbles Maplestick. We have Andy Samberg as Pobbert Linksley. David Strathern as Milton Linksley. Idris Elba, of course, returning as Chief Bogo. Shakira as Gazelle, returned. Also, there's a really fun music video of Shakira in kind of one of Gazelle's outfits from the movie, singing Zoo and such, so that's fun there. Patrick Warburton, Kronk, is Merwin Dancer, which is just great. Quinta Bronson is Dr. Fusby. I think she's from Abbott Elementary. We have Danny Trejo, awesome, as Jesus. Pretty much anybody else. We have Nate Torrance returning as Clawhauser. We have this is just great. We have Macaulay Culkin as Catrick Linksley and Brenda Song as Kitty Linksley, which is hilarious because they are married in real life. The kid from Home Alone married London from Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. Yeah, that's just funny. We have John Leguizamo as Anthony Snootley, who's the anteater. You would recognize him as Sid the Sloth from Ice Age. They have archival footage of Tommy Lister Jr. as Fennec. The actor, unfortunately, had passed away, and they had asked his family for approval to use some of the archival footage and stuff like that they had from him from the first movie to use in this movie, and they said go for it. We have Maurice LaMarche as Mr. Big, Jenny Slate returning as Don Bellwether, Tig Notaro as Big Tig, who is one of the other, I think one of the pig cops, possibly. There's several other ones that just pop up here that are just like fun little name funny things. Ed Sheeran is in here. Michael J. Fox as Michael J. the Fox. There's Robert Irwin as Robert Furwin, which is just funny. And then Dwayne The Rock Johnson does have a cameo appearance as a dick that gets stuck in a tuba. There's like many others that popped up in this as well that are just other cameo appearances in this movie because they were either in at Disney at some point in time and they're like, hey, you want to come do like this random voice in this scene in Zootopia? Sure, why the heck not? So we get like a bunch of those little cameo things, which are just fun. It builds up the world. They do that in a lot of Disney movies now and Pixar movies, which I'm fine with. Side jokes and things like that. It's like, hey, you got to be in a Disney movie. What are you going to say? There you go. So that's what we have there. As I said, I very much love this movie. I love how they have Nick and Judy have to like get through some more of these barriers in their relationship in order to become stronger friends and better partners. And it also just makes them get through some of their emotional constipation, which is something I'm also very proud of them for. And it does kind of like the miscommunication thing, but in a more reasonable way of like how it's done type of thing, where there are more reasons as to why it happens. Hey, what are you doing? I love you. Yes, I do. I love you very much. You're a good boy. So that's what I have for this. I thank you very much for watching. I know this is a little bit longer review than I normally do, but there was a lot that I wanted to cover for the movie. So that's what I have. I thank you for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!